Wow. I'm not gonna lie, I never really thought I'd make it this far. 900 subscribers? Crazy to think, another 100 and I'll get that much coveted 1,000 mark. And from there I can start monetizing my videos if I want to. But I won't, because quite frankly, I can't stand ads and I do not want to put anybody through that if they don't have to. However, I wouldn't mind sponsorships, but they have to be things I approve of, so no Raycon because I need muffs. I have very small ears and earbuds just don't work for me. And I won't be doing Manscaped because, well, I'm not a man, but I digress. I figure this time around, I'm gonna show off my movie collection. I'm gonna try my best to go in chronological order, but just know that along the way things are going to get muddled and I'm only really more of like an armchair video collector, so if I get any details wrong, you can feel free to correct me in the comments. With that said, let's go to the oldest piece in my video collection. Or rather, should I say pieces? The Sound of Music, Part 1 and 2. Actually, wait, I got that mixed up. So we got Part 1 here, and we got Part 2 here. And if this little logo right here looks familiar, I started adding intros to some of my videos, and that was one of them. This is the Magnetic Video Corporation.
By special arrangement with 20th Century Fox, Magnetic Video Corporation is proud to offer the following major motion picture on video cassette.
And if you also watched my VHS playthrough of the Zelda mod of Breath of the Wild, this art may look familiar because I just kind of redid my own thing for the thumbnail. So I figure I might as well show off the tape a little bit. This is one of the things that's interesting. I think the label got peeled off of this one. Is the idea that the tape is not only substantially heavier than the typical tape, but it also has a different color up here on the top. In future releases, they would be all in black, with a few minor exceptions that I found here and there. So the crazy thing is, these tapes came out all the way in 1978, which completely blew my mind when I first realized this fact because I didn't think VHS really became a thing until at least 1980. This one actually has the label on it. Just wanted to show it off a little bit. And so this was a stark revelation. I had to go back into my research to figure this out. And what's interesting is if you go on the back, it actually shows what other movies the Magnetic Video Corporation has for sale. So I can only imagine how rare these would be. It's hard to say if they'd be expensive, but they'd definitely be rare. Especially since this came out at a time where the VCR was really expensive. Most people, I think, would have rented their VCR as well as rented videos because both of which would have just been way too expensive otherwise. So one thing I want to note about the Magnetic Video Corporation is that they were later bought out by CBS Fox. Now the main reason I bring this up is because this particular tape I have here, right before the movie plays,
By special arrangement with United Artists Corporation, Magnetic Video Corporation is proud to offer the following special video presentation.
and on top of that, I just love looking at this tape. Look at this rough texture. This is just not something that I've seen on a whole lot of tapes. It gives it a lot of character. And on top of that, if you watch it, this is a really good movie. And it's kind of weird. I remember the first time I picked this tape up a while ago, I wasn't too keen on the cover art, but it's kind of grown on me. It has like a subtle elegance, like a less is more sort of thing to it. And I love the idea that it even says it's in color. Now, I have some even earlier releases from CBS Fox here. I'm pretty sure I've showed this one off. My version of Dr. No. Now, the thing that I love about these early CBS Fox cases is the idea that they slide out, much like a DVD. On top of that, it's always fun going back to these really early eras of videos. Not only do you get a very particular picture quality, because this was before like THX and digitally remastering came about, so I'm pretty convinced that they just took the film they had at the time and just made it into a VHS without any sort of filters. It almost makes it seem a little more pure in that way. However, the VHS degradation does kind of hinder that a little bit, but it's still very interesting. And then we have Live and Let Die. As you can see, this one is in a bit rougher shape. The box is kind of coming undone. And you can tell this was definitely sat out in a window for a while because of how pale it is, but you can just really see how much we have fallen in terms of the art of the cover design. Like, I know this is probably just the movie poster, but I would love to see this cover on a DVD shelf. I would buy it in a heartbeat because this looks fantastic. Now, the interesting thing about this one are these two little pictures here on the back. Now, this is really interesting. So this picture here in the middle, that is actually from a deleted scene of Roger Moore's next adventure, The Man with the Golden Gun. And over here, this isn't really a scene that's really in the movie at all. Maybe it's some sort of publicity still, because Baron Savity never wore anything like that in this movie. But if it is a deleted scene, that would be very interesting. And this one I know I must have showed off. The Spy Who Loved Me. Once again, you can see it's in a little bit of rougher shape, but at the same time, I feel like the beauty hasn't been completely lost from it. And obviously this thing wasn't sitting in a window for 20 years. So I figure I'd pull it out. And once again, it's interesting that this one has the different colored top. Up next is a rather curious video media. It is called the Capacitance Electric Disc Player. And despite my best efforts, I have been unable to find a working player. Or better yet, should I say, one that doesn't cost more than $100. Plus shipping on these things would be ridiculous. So essentially how this works is that you kind of insert this whole platter into the machine. It takes this top part out, which contains the disc within. You take it out, the disc stays in, and it plays much like an old record player, or an LP if you prefer. It's not a medium that lasted very long. While it definitely competed with VHS in terms of being a lot cheaper to produce and manufacture, it only lasted for really a few years, and as such, there's only really a handful of movies that were made for this, and the players are quite hard to find these days, especially working. But the thing that I love about them, and it's interesting, I got most of these from a garage sale. The guy had these up in his garage as like movie posters, and I think that's quite a brilliant idea. If you ever hold one of these things, it's really dense. It's very hard plastic. And I figured this would be a fun thing to mention as well. Because it's bigger, you got more pictures to be able to show for the preview, but also the description here. If you were to compare that to the description of my VHS copy that I have, you will find that they are two different descriptions. They have a very similar sentiment, of course, but two very different ones. And I figure while I'm here, I'll show you that this one also has the different colored top. I'm not really sure how common that was. Maybe it was just the manufacturer that made them like that. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm gonna go through the rest of my CED collection. So up next we have A View to a Kill. So this is a rather interesting one. Later in the lifespan of the CED, found a way to get higher picture quality. However, That meant that it had to be put on multiple discs since there was less space to it. And if you look right at the bottom here, it says Part 2. So I do not have Part 1. I would wager it's probably the same picture, but it probably has a different description on the back. And once again, the art of the cover. Now obviously this is not something you're going to fit onto a DVD because this is the size of an album, but you just gotta love how much detail they put in there. In fact, if you look really closely, you can almost see brush strokes. Now up next is another two-parter, but the crazy thing is, I actually have both parts this time. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I believe I showed these off in my No Time to Die review because there was a lot of references to On Her Majesty's Secret Service in that movie. Now as you can see, it's a little broken in the corner, but this is actually not a bad thing, as I can actually open this up and show you what a typical disc looks like. And the crazy thing is, if you really zoom in there, you can actually see grooves. And that is where the needle would go. And out of all the movies that I own, this is probably the one I would want to see on capacitance electric disc the most. I actually own this movie also on Laserdisc, which I'll see about showing that one later in my Laserdisc section. And the last one to mention is Dr. No. Now this is the thing I find so interesting, is it's the same cover as the VHS, but yet they have all this room here, and yet it seems like this one is a more complete picture, especially with it saying James Bond on the top. That little bit of red really makes it stick out. And on top of that, why is the Dr. No up here instead of down here? And here is probably the most interesting thing. So you might zoom in on there on the bottom and it almost looks like it was part of a greater picture that just kind of got painted over. Well, that's exactly what happened actually. You can kind of see it on the VHS as well, but to a lesser extent. Essentially, there was a whole bunch of women that were down under here, and if you look closely you can kind of see the outline of where each one would have been. But for some unknown reason, they painted over it, and it looks kind of awkward because part of his sleeve is missing. You'd think they would just kind of paint the rest of that back in, but I guess not. And the back, a slightly different description for both. Up next, I have my later version of CBS Fox videos. So as I already showed you with A Shot in the Dark, they became a bit simpler as they went further on, opting to the more traditional box style that we all know and love today. This is my version of From Russia with Love, a little paled out, but you can still see it. I'm not too big a fan of this cover. I'm actually a bigger fan of the GameCube cover, because it still kind of has that same art style as the Dr. No illustration. But I will definitely admit, when I compare this to the Blu-ray cover, yeah, this is a whole lot better. Now, what's rather fascinating with this particular version is that there are slight edits compared to the other versions that I have seen. The first is that the Russian subtitles that Tatiana Romanova has are missing. And on top of that, The difference in the credits compared with the re-release that came out in the late 90s and early 2000s, the timing just doesn't match up. And I think the main reason for this is there is no James Bond will return in this version. It just goes through. Really unique because I didn't really think they did a whole lot of changes other than just correcting the sound and picture quality. So that was really interesting. And then after that, we have Goldfinger. Now, this one is rather special as it's a beta tape rather than a VHS. And just in case, this is what it looks like. Now, it's rather interesting. The beta tapes are obviously smaller than VHS, but yet they still use the VHS box, but just put a little spacer in there so that way the tape will fit. Main reason I bought this was for a little experiment. A while ago I realized that if you take the spool out of a beta tape and put it in a VHS body, you can record with it and play it on a VHS. And I was wondering if the same thing was true when it came to just the standard beta film that was recorded on a Betamax. And no, it doesn't work. If I were to take the film out and put this in a VHS, you could maybe get some really distorted sound, but I have yet to find picture. But if nothing else, it's just interesting because it fits with the rest of my CBS Fox video collection. While this is an iconic scene, I'm still missing those illustrations. And then after that, we have what's actually my favorite James Bond movie, You Only Live Twice. I'm just kind of hearing all the rage comments going on now. It's funny. Well, this is probably my favorite James Bond movie. Pierce Brosnan's probably my favorite Bond. But figured I would show this around all the same. Now comes to the most amount of money that I have ever spent on a VHS tape. The Warriors of the Wind. I've dedicated a whole video to this one because it does have a very interesting story behind it. And on top of that, it's just kind of interesting to see what an anime dub what it looked like before it started to become something a bit more professional. And after that, I'm gonna go on to the Rocky movies. I'm just gonna simply show the covers real quick, maybe even just show you the inside as well. I like this little sticker right here. And that actually reminds me of something I forgot to show, actually. So with the From Russia with Love tape, there's another odd little sticker on it right here. When the film is in that little window, that means it's completely rewound. That is something I have never seen on any other VHS tape before. Forgot to show the back real quickly. And then we go over to Rocky 2 here, just kind of showing the cover. Go into the back. And then we go to the front here. Looks like the label fell out. That's kind of the thing with these tapes being this old, is sometimes the labels just don't stick on there anymore. But the tape itself is still in good shape, which is really good. So we got the front, we got the back, and then we got the tape itself, and the label just fell off it. Yeah, you can just kind of slide that back on there for the moment. And it's just as good as new. And then we have a Rocky 4. Gonna go for the front, and the back, and then we show what the tape looks like. And once again, this one has that nice rough texture. It adds a fair bit of character, and it's something I wish was a bit more common. And then right here is probably the first double tape that I have. Fiddler on the Roof. It is a very long one, so they couldn't fit it on one tape and keep it in very good quality. So as you can see, it's an extra thick box, and you got the tapes. And they are also labeled. So you got part 1, and you got part 2, so you know which tape goes where. There's like a little intermission in the middle, and that is where you realize to switch the tape. I figure while I'm talking about double inkers, I figure I would show you the rest of them that I have. So, probably the first one that I bought was Around the World in 80 Days. Now, a lot of people don't really know about this movie. Most people know about the Jackie Chan edition, which is a real shame because this one is pretty good. I mean, hey, it won 5 Academy Awards. At the same time, it does kind of come from an older era in cinema, and so sensibilities are not really as good as they are now, if you know what I mean. There's a few things that might be a little problematic for some viewers today. Now, here's the interesting thing about this movie. When I got it, I was really excited to see it because it's always fun to see how people interpret Jules Verne's writing in terms of cinema and other media. The thing that was utterly devastating is that part 1 of this tape has been completely removed. I have no idea how. You just stick it in the VCR and it's just black. You get no picture, no nothing. As such, I spent a long time trying to find a copy so I could find a first tape and watch it and get the whole story. But it wasn't until years later that I managed to get it on DVD. Now, I did a whole review of this movie, but this is the last thing I want to mention about this. Is even though it's on DVD and it could fit a lot more space, it is so weird that they still separate it by part 1 and part 2. Maybe if I got the Blu-ray version, they would have been able to fit it all in one disc. Apparently it has a lot of data capacity. And then after that, we got probably my favorite, I'm going to call it epic movie, Lawrence of Arabia. Once again, you might recognize the cover art as I once again shooped it to create one of my Legend of Zelda on VHS videos. And I figure I'll show the tapes off as well, And it's interesting to kind of see how different manufacturers make their tapes. Like this one is from Columbia Pictures, but it was produced by RCA. And it's also interesting that this is the director's cut. So I'd be very curious to see how much an original copy on VHS would go for. Now up next I have is a rather miscellaneous thing. A very similar story with the part 1 and part 2. So a while ago I bought the part 1. Now for those of you that don't know what Serial is, it's something that's kind of getting a bit of a revival today. But instead of going into the movie theater once a week to see how the next story is, you would just wait until next week to see how the next episode came out. Between both of these is a continually flowing narrative of 15 different segments, each about 20 minutes each. They create one long and epic story. Now, probably the thing I find just a little disappointing about this is instead of having like some really well-known Batman villain, they have either a really obscure one or one that they created purely for this serial, known as the Wizard. Even though these both came out in 1949, there's still a lot of fun. It's hard to say if it necessarily keeps the integrity of the Batman character, but it's still just weird to think that there were other incarnations even before Adam West was donning the suit of Batman. And now we get into a rather big one I have. Star Wars. I still find this absolutely weird. I get the idea that they wanted to protect the case, but the idea of like this whole squeeze and shake thing, it just doesn't really work. Like, I squeeze and I shake. Well, actually, that was actually pretty easy, but sometimes I just haven't been able to get it out, and sometimes it's hard to get it back in. And quite frankly, I would just rather have the box without the obnoxious case on it. The crazy thing is, they were selling the whole trilogy where I found this in these squeeze and shake cases, and I kind of wonder if maybe I should have bought the other two. Maybe these particular cases are rare, or perhaps this is like one of those graded sort of things. But quite frankly, I like the box better. I think it has a better texture to it. It's a little weaker, but I just understand it more. And I already showed off the Empire Strikes Back already, so I'm going to pass on that. And then over here, we have The Return of the Jedi. This one is a rather interesting one because when I picked it up, it was still in the saran wrap. However, I unwrapped it because I just wanted to see the movie. However, as one person pointed out in the comments, that was probably a stupid idea because if I were to have kept this thing in saran wrap, I probably could have pawned it off for like $300. As of now, I could probably maybe get like $45 out of it. But at the same time, I don't really want to sell it, and I don't really care about the collector value of it. I just like having it in my collection. It completes the rest of my CBS Fox Star Wars movies. And once again, that cover art. Can't they re-release it and have this same cover art? Of course, just kind of take out the hi-fi and the CBS Fox logo. But I feel like you got a really good cover here. And now I already showed you that I had Empire Strikes Back on CED. But I also have the original Star Wars on Laserdisc. And once again, it's just amazing about Laserdisc how you can have this much space to fill up an entire painting. And it's also curious, right here at the bottom, 20th Century Fox. Now, as you can tell from CBS and Fox, CBS merged with 20th Century Fox Pictures to make, well, CBS Fox. Now this goes into my next one here. This one was actually released by 20th Century Fox, as you can see on the top here, instead of CBS Fox, but still very much has that same style. We're going to open this up. This plastic case was to help keep it all in place. Oh, this almost ran away from me there. In here we have the 20th Century Fox Laserdisc. Now, unfortunately, this one has been infected with the plague of laser rot. So I was a little disappointed when I saw that, but at the same time, it kind of helped with my collector's piece. And just look at how glossy that is. You can tell this has been exposed to like very little light. In fact, real quick, let me see if I can just slide this out so that way you can see the cover itself. Once again, look at the lush picture of it. Maybe it's just me, but I think this was the better cover art compared to the CBS Fox release, but I'll leave that up for you to decide. Might as well stick with Sean Connery and go with his Greatest Love ballad. Honestly, that's the impression I get from this picture. Maybe it's because it's like so smoothed out of the cover, but it just kind of looks like Sean Connery and the melody of love. But it's interesting. It's a box set. And you got 3 adventures. Once again, it's interesting when you look at the Dr. No picture here. You can see that his arms also do not match up, which I'm pretty sure these women are supposed to be under him, but for some odd reason they just kind of chopped him out and put him there. So this is a deluxe letterbox copy, which for those of you that don't know, letterbox is the old term that was used for what we call widescreen today. And it's quite fascinating because if you look on some of these older copies that have a letterbox, they actually have this little warning here. Basically saying, yes, the bars on the top are normal. That's what letterbox means. It's just kind of fascinating. And then on the inside, we have like a little bit of a poster that kind of gives you some information about the movies. And on top of that, maybe it's just me, but I feel like this is the kind of picture that was probably adorned in like so many teenage girls' bedrooms. Either that or maybe that's a stereotype that certain shows or media made up that wasn't actually a thing, but I digress. As for the movies themselves, they come in these nice little packets. Now what's rather annoying about these is that while they don't have laser rot, unfortunately, all 3 of them just have this like 10-minute segment on both sides where it just refuses to play. If you skip across that 10-minute section, you can watch the whole movie just fine. Styrofoam at the back. But if you try to go through that 10-minute section, it freezes. I do not want to forget about Dr. No here. Now, I just feel like this is a much better cover than what was on the CED version. And I know it's basically the same thing, but the little bit of red really makes the image pop. And the fun thing about this one is, this one was also in saran wrap and I unwrapped it. However, I also bought it for like $10 off of Amazon, so I don't think it was that valuable. But once again, interesting to see 20th Century Fox Video. And unlike the CBS Fox, which has like a little logo at the beginning of each one, the 20th Century Fox ones, to my knowledge, never did have their own logo.
The following United Artists feature is brought to you by 20th Century Fox Video.
So we'll skip ahead to George Lazenby. It's always kind of sad whenever there's like a George Lazenby collection because he just only had the one movie. And dang it, I would love to see a universe where he did Diamonds Are Forever. I feel like he was the one that needed to finish that story. Sean Connery may have been able to do it, but I don't know. I feel like Sean Connery was the Superman. However, Lazenby, I think, was more like the everyman. He had emotions. He was vulnerable. He could be defeated. Sean Connery? No. You can't defeat Sean Connery. He's James Bond. So just like the CED version, this one actually comes on 2 discs, which are on the side. And it's interesting that these 2 pictures show up on the CED version. This one on the cover, and this one on the back. Now when you open it up, now that is a cover. Just look at that. And if you were to get like the CBS Fox version on tape, which I'm gonna guess is very rare because I just haven't been able to find one. And once again, it is a letterbox. And then I'm gonna move on to this one, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was interesting when I was picking up this one. The store actually had Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Last Crusade. And I kind of thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? I want the original. Now this one is on one disc, as you can see, but it also folds out. Much like how later in DVDs they would give you like video selection, this really got started on Laserdisc. Then we go to the back. And once again, this is one of the things I love about Laserdisc and CED. There's just so much room in order to really let the image pop. And once again, if you look really closely, you can almost see the pencil drawings, the brush stroke, and so many other things on it as well. And I like how the longer you look at it, the more little details you see along the way. Now, kind of in that same category, I have Jurassic Park, which was actually on 2 discs because it's a rather long movie. Someday I need to get around to actually watching this. There's so many people that are just like, oh, you need to watch it. Jurassic Park is an epic movie. In fact, I have a cousin that just absolutely loves this movie. And yes, this is the first one, not any of the other ones. Now, the other thing to mention as well is that I did have the box for this one, but I actually gave it to somebody, to a huge Jurassic Park fan, and they just absolutely loved it. But hey, we both got what we wanted. I got the movie, and they got an interesting piece of memorabilia. And much like the Indiana Jones Laserdisc, it was actually something that folded out, very much in the same way. And then the last, and probably the one I didn't expect to ever be on Laserdisc, is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I would have figured by this point they would have went the DVD, but I guess this was just kind of the last gasp for Laserdisc. And it's also interesting that here it says widescreen rather than letterbox. It really kind of shows you the changing time. Silly me, I got talking about Laserdisc and I lost track of how I got on this subject in the first place. And that was Star Wars. Now, I'm not really sure how many people knew that this last particular trilogy came in a box set, just like this. And it's interesting to see the proof of purchase. This was always the thing that was funny growing up, is we had the special edition of New Hope. The Empire Strikes Back, I think, was just kind of recorded off of television on 3 different tapes, so good luck trying to watch it. But The Return of the Jedi was this exact version. Well, I mean, not this exact one. I mean, ours was a lot more beat up, obviously. So, I'm going to take these out of the box to show you what they look like. And it's just really amazing how good a shape these are in. So, we got the original New Hope. We go to the back. And what's rather fascinating, this actually just came out of the box. This is actually a movie ticket of when the movies were starting to come back out in theaters again. So I'm holding kind of a piece of history here with The Empire Strikes Back. There might be more in there. Oh, there is. Yep. And we got Star Wars A New Hope. And let me guess, is this one? Nope, this one is just another Star Wars. But once again, it's just an interesting little touch. Just found this whole box set at a garage sale for like $5. Not only do I get a really good rendition of the originals, but it's fun that there's a little bit of a personal touch in there as well. And then we go on to the Return of the Jedi, which is my personal favorite of the trilogy. What can I say? I'm all about the big epic conclusion. Now the other thing I want to show as well, this one also came from that same garage sale as this one, the making of Star Wars. And it's very interesting how it's very much in the same style as the box set that I showed you. I'm not sure if this is necessarily a rare tape or not, but I can't help thinking that this was a prize given out from a cereal box. Like if you collected enough box tops, you got this. Now this video got a little longer than I expected, so I'm actually going to make this a two-parter. But I want to end with one last thing I feel like a lot of people don't know about. And that is the Dr. Seuss films. Figure I'm just going to go through these one at a time. So we got Pontible Pock and his Magic Piano. As you can see, this one has been very well loved. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean, I used to watch this one a lot, and I think that's why the box is slowly being eaten away. Flip back to the side, and we see the back. I feel like a lot of people don't really know about these ones, which is a real shame. They're actually really good. And then we have the Hoober Floob Highway. Let's just say this one has changed meaning for me as I've gotten older. It's all about the idea of this formless baby that's trying to figure out what kind of life they want to live. So yeah, in a ways it does kind of strike a nerve for me. This one I feel like has a little recognition at least. So a lot of people know about The Grinch Stole Christmas, but do they know that there was a Halloween special known as Grinch Night? I do know that the Nostalgia Critic covered this one on his series of Dark Toons, and it was really nice to see somebody talk about these old animated classics, because, I don't know, I just haven't really had anybody talk about them before. And then, this one right here. I spent so many years trying to track this one down. It's not so much that it was rare, it's just I went to so many thrift stores trying to look for it, and it just took a very long time. By the point I actually found this, I actually was able to see the Illumination version, and while it was like okay, it kind of filled in my fix, I still wanted to see the original Lorax. Now, the main reason I like the original one is, I should probably mention spoilers, but this movie is over 40 years old. I'm not really sure what the statute of limitations is. But the main thing I love is it's not necessarily a happy ending. Basically, the last seed is given to a kid, and we never really see what happens. He just walks away with it slowly when the screen pans up to a small hole in the smog. It's all about the idea that, like, we're the kid. The fate of the world rests with us. And that hole in the smog tells us that there is hope, that there is a way to be able to fix all this. There might be more, but these are the ones that I have in my collection. I do know for sure that they had one for Cat in the Hat, and there was also a Cat in the Hat versus the Grinch. Which is really interesting. I actually used to have both of those in my parents' place, but, well, the Cat in the Hat lost the tape, and the Cat in the Hat versus the Grinch, well, I think it just got completely worn out, unfortunately. So yes, I hope you'll join me next time, where I do a part 2 showing off my video collection. Until next time, keep having fun.